Hello, it is January 16th, 2025. Happy New Year, all. This is devlog number 2 for the project Kickstep. It's been a moment. um, I took some time off naturally for the holidays, and then I also came down with a sickness kind of last week, so if I'm sounding a little crummy, I apologize, but it is purely just congestion at this point, so I think I'm good to kind of walk and talk through what I've been doing over the past month and some change. To put it in like broad strokes, a lot of this past month for Project Kickstep has been centered around the getting like a functional gun in place, kind of like setting up the pieces needed for proper combat to be in place. So I will jump into it, and it's going to be kind of hard to catch everything, because if I'm looking at this right, there basically was no shooting at all from the last devlog, so like top to bottom everything's going to be kind of new for a second. I might miss some things, but I'll also try to talk about it. I'm actually going to turn the volume here just a little bit more on the music, because we've got some sound effects to show off. Okay, so let's try and narrow the changes down, and we'll build it up top to bottom. So first things first, the rifle is now unequipable. As you can see here, it comes with its own kind of like very wide cyan colored reticle. It can be unequipped. And yeah, I don't think there'll be, and that's kind of all there is to speak to equipping and unequipping. There's a bunch of little pieces that are moving into place for both cases around like moving the mesh onto the model and then making it visible or invisible. That's kind of stuff that you would expect, honestly. The sound effects, I'll say, like very little of it is original. Some of it most of it is from sound packs. There's a little bit that I've like made, you could say, originally using Unreal's meta soundscape system, but naturally none of the very complicated stuff. Disregard that blue line that keeps coming over here. We'll look at that later. Next is, I guess, the shooting itself. We got this kind of like sci-fi sound. There's a couple particles happening here. Two around the gun. There's the like kind of like the cone explosion, and then there's also the like the aura. I don't know what you call it, the flash that's happening around the gun. There's also like a flash of like light separate from the particles, which could have been embodied into the, pulled into the particle system. You also noticed probably that there was like steam coming out of the gun. Tentatively speaking, I'm envisioning this game having not an ammo system where you need to like track and maintain ammo, like you have to like pick it up or something like that. But I do see it having something that will still enforce weapon swapping. I think I might have spoken to this in the first video. So in the debug widget that's kind of in the middle right of the screen, there's heat and heat cooldown towards the bottom. What you're seeing is sort of what you're hearing and then also seeing is sort of an output of that. So as the heat gets higher, it goes up to 10. The pitch of the gunshot goes up. We're just pitching that up. The steam is getting a little bit louder and it's widening. You can also see that like there's actually a second steam geyser that kind of shows up around 6. Heat, it's on the bottom end, stretching along the bottom of the screen. When the heat cooldown, which is just ticking down as soon as you stop shooting, hits 0, then the heat itself starts ticking down. So the gun, has sort of a decompress state. We'll just let it fire all the way. Once we get high enough, I think to 8 heat it was, we start getting a little siren. It doesn't go over 10, and there's currently no mechanical limitation. Realistically, you'll be enforced to weapon swap at that point. It'll you'll be stunned, or like the gun will just stop shooting and you'll have no other choice. Whatever. There'll be some sort of quote unquote penalty. But at the time being, I just haven't implemented that because there's no alternative. Like you can unequip the weapon, but then Okay, it's like, so what? Like, it's not a good gameplay loop yet to really bother having the penalty enforced yet. So for testing purposes, it's easier to just leave it as is. There is also a bullet trace and hit sparks. You can see, you can only see the tracer if you actually hit something, which is, you could say, a bug. It's undesirable, but you know, it's noted. I just haven't fixed the behavior, but you can see little lines that kind of are left behind. It's a little, looks better and clearer in the dark, which is kind of how I'm envisioning this game, is to have sort of a dark theme to it. That's why I have the like kind of random roof up here. See, everything looks a little bit better, a little bit more pronounced. The green flash of the gun, the orange sparks and the hit sparks. The tracers are more noticeable, much better than when you're out here. So that does that. Let's like look at the meta soundscape actually a little bit, just because that was like a really big step for me, and I haven't done anything with audio for the most part. I guess I did some voice recordings in Project Blue. Weapon, rifle. I'm tentatively calling this weapon the tracker, which will make more sense later. But in the browser, it's still called just rifle, which is just the default name of the weapon, I think, in Unreal. So that is something I do intend to change at some point. Okay, so here's the meta soundscape. Excuse me. If I hit play, turn this down. If I hit play, we should hear nothing. There's a ton of inputs that I have over here, but these are not real inputs. These are like dials, like this pitch variance that I added just so I could like toy with it as I was trying to figure out what I wanted it to sound like. The real value that matters is this one, which is called heat, which is what I kind of already talked about. This is just the like now the sound side, or well, yeah, sure, whatever. The sound side of what heat means. It's being fed into the metasound node that's being run whenever the weapon is equipped, and so I don't know why this is actually set to a range of 1 to 10, but I don't think it really matters. Here the 10 makes more sense. So what's happening here is we've got a mixer and we're feeding in 4 channels. This one is the gunshot. So that's a separate input that is just every time the gunshot trigger occurs, we then send the input into this. It's not like every time you tap the button, it's an automatic gun. You can hold it, but there's still a cooldown that's being processed on the rifle component. So once it's off cooldown, if the input's still being held, it sends a trigger, which gives it this noise. You can see that we actually have a pitch shift that's taking in the heat. So that's how the pitch rises. I'm actually not sure if I totally like how this has come out though, because when I'll play the actual game again real quick. When you're just like letting it go, the pitch shifting upward kind of creates the illusion that it's shooting faster, which is not actually true. But when I hear the pitch go up like that, I don't know if it's a me thing, but I kind of suspect that most people will actually hear that in the same way. We kind of associate pitch with like speed or like tiny fastness. So it's sort of an indirect effect that I didn't want. I just wanted it to sound like the gunshot was. I guess I didn't want the gunshot to sound like it was doing anything, but I wanted it to reflect the relative heat. And then of course I've added the steam and the siren. So maybe this is redundant, but I actually kind of prefer it on some level over those other effects, just because it feels more native to the gun. Like you're always going to hear the gunshot, so having the gunshot sound change as an indicator of the heat is kind of, it's more comfortable, I would say, on some level. For the Steams, we have these 2 wave players. They're just playing a Steam asset, same asset, but they don't have very good like distinction. And it might be worth me like fishing up like another wave file just so I have some variance there. But they are pitch shifted a little bit differently. I want it to this one. It's not terribly intuitive from just here, but this one is correlated to the steam valve. Excuse me. The steam valve that's coming off to the top right, the one that plumes like more in your face, and the one that's kind of down along the bottom of the screen is associated with this one. They have their gains being calculated programmatically as well, similar to how this one's being pitch shifted programmatically based on heat. So we can just look at this real quickly. They have different thresholds, which I made this like a variable instead of just a static value, because if I'm having the visual of the steam start appear at say like 4 heat for one of the valve, for one of the steam geysers, I also want the sound to reflect that too. So I made it a variable here, and then also um, hanging off the rifle component. I'm trying to think. How did I attach that? I forget where I even put the particles for that. Excuse me. Rifles. See, okay. No, I'm sorry. I don't want this. I want. Set steam release. Oh yeah, okay, it's in the rifle component. But yeah, it's just in the setup stage. We just set up these two Niagara particle systems. So actually, we can look at these. This is also something that was new. I think brand new, right? I've done audio recordings, but I had never messed with metasound. But this is also new, so we can take a look at this. Here's kind of like the baseline geyser. Both of the geysers are using the same particle, but I give them slightly different values. The alpha, I think maybe the lifetime minimum is the only thing that I don't change. But for the bottom one, I think actually none of these values change. I think I just use this as is. But for that top one, the threshold for the steam appearing is like, I think 4 heat, right? So it appears as such, but then as I do it more, the alpha is increased, so it's got a thicker whiteness, and the cone is also spreading. Give it like a wider cone, and then naturally to fill that cone in, you also need more particles. So I believe all 3 of those values are increasing as you go. The bottom one stays the same, but it also, or doesn't, I don't believe it scales, but it also shows up much later in the heat valve, so I didn't feel like it was necessary to kind of clog too much of the view with it. Yeah, so you can, with that in mind, now you can imagine how these values are feeding into the alpha is making it a lot denser looking. I could probably even, like this, I think it only scales up to like 0.5 or something on the either of the current steam geysers, so I probably could go much harder. I think, yeah, I think that's as dense as it is. Cone angle, I think it scales like up to 30 or something. You can kind of see now how, while it is a wider geyser, it's like the particle count is sort of not keeping up, and it looks kind of, it actually like thins it a little bit, which isn't good for selling the fact that it's like being overblown. Like 100,000, yeah, it's just like a white jet stream. It's like a jet taking off or something. So yeah, Niagara is super cool, super powerful. I'm blown away every time I find the new subsystem in Unreal. Metasound is pretty cool too, but I'm not gonna lie, like the this stuff is a lot more obtuse for me. I'm not much of a sound guy. I don't have like a ton of experience with understanding what sound really is at a I don't know what to call it, like an elemental level. Like, you know, pitch is kind of obvious, but then like you get some of these nodes where I'm just like, I don't know what half these things are, just like reading them, and so it's hard to even intuit what they'll do. So, but particle stuff, Niagara stuff, very cool, kind of straightforward, at least for me. Yeah, we can look at some of the other ones that I've done too. We don't have to like go into it as deep. Here's the hit spark. This is just casting off anything that the gun is shooting. The gun is hit scanned, so it's drawing like a debug trace line that's like checking for collision, and then if it connects to something, then it draws the hit spark. The whole reason there's not a trace around being drawn when you shoot into the distance is because if nothing gets hit, there's not an endpoint, and so I need to just do a little bit of logic where I'm like, okay, if you don't hit something, you know, draw the line however far out, 5,000 units, and that's where the tracer's endpoint is. But right now there's none, no collision, so yeah, that's the hit spark. Let's see, 50, we can. Now it's crazy. Now it's like an incendiary or something. Tense it. Intensity, if I'm not mistaken, is actually used in a number of spots. I was kind of like setting this up to be the sort of master variable, if you will, which I could have done with Steam release too. I didn't really think about it at the time, but intensity. Let's see. I guess we just scroll through the whole thing. We'll see where I used it at. It's gonna affect things like the lifetime. Yeah. Okay. So the intensity is 1.0. Which I believe I wrote this with the intention of it being kind of, what the heck? So, okay, so one thing I've noticed is sometimes these previews just break. I think it is just it being broken and not my stuff. So if I hit infinite and it recompiles, give it a second. Okay, now we're working again, and then I go back to once, and now it's working again. I don't know why that happens, but yeah. So intensity, yeah, I think I've got two different like use cases for this hit particle. There's when you hit a target, which I haven't shown yet intentionally, and when you're hitting the ground. And I just want the hit sparks are a little more intense. Particle count is kind of a part of intensity, but I made it separate because it's being fed into the spawn count, which is the number of particles we're generating for this emitter, for this particle setup. And because it's in looking for an integer value, I can't just feed it intensity. And there's some stuff you can do, like multiplying. I think you can like convert float into integer, but I had already set up all the other use cases for intensity, and then I got to this one, and it's like, oh well, shit. I think like one is per the other set use cases is like the maximum. So it's very awkward. I can't just convert like 0.7 or something into an integer and then somehow get value out of that, right? It's everything's going to round to either 0 or 1 depending on what rounding type I use. So tentatively it's a separate variable. Maybe someday I'll be less lazy and I'll just like make the intensity max quote unquote 100, and that'll make it like then I can do calculations. I can convert it to an int and use calculations off of it for the particle count. Something to just scale this number. But yeah, so the two use cases are hitting particle and not particle. What you're seeing is like the max. This is like if hitting a target, so it's a little more tense than what I think being shown. I don't know if it's very obvious, especially because we're at a weird angle compared to the. But it's a I think we're shooting at like maybe half intensity. Calculating trade. Just check for hit somewhere. I could probably just put it here. Check for hit. Play sound. Rifle hit spark. Tense. Oh yeah. I'm glad I threw this because I needed to update this now. But yeah. So here we are. Excuse me. We're setting when we call the hit. If we there's a separate sound effect that plays when we hit a desired target or a target dummy, as it's just right now. But otherwise, everything is. I mean, we're still showing everything else. We're still spawning the hit spark, and we're doing a calculation here where we get the normal vector of the collision, and we're doing like a reflection off of it. So yeah, that might have not been obvious, but pretty proud of how that turned out. There's like a little bit of like a deflection of the particles. It's not just like exploding perpendicular or like going through the thing you're shooting. it bounces off of it in a sense. So we're hitting at like an angle down here, and it's kind of spraying to the left. You see, we go here and it sprays up, and here it sprays down. And there's a little bit of variance, right? You don't want it to be like super obvious, but like consistent, I should say, not obvious. You don't want it to be super consistent so that it's obvious that it's, you know, a game that's fake. But I think the illusion is pretty good. I shoot like straight into a wall. Sparks kind of come right back at you. Don't want to spoil that yet. Let's see. What were the other particles that I had? Bullet trail, muzzle flash. Bullet flash isn't anything too special. It's a little interesting though because it's the only one particle I've done where there's like two components. This is the one I was saying. Excuse me. This is what I was saying I could add light to. I didn't realize this when I made this originally, but and actually we can real quickly go back into the demo. One thing you might notice is that the hit sparks have light to them, right? The light that's coming off my gun, that's like a separate object that I'm just turning off and on really fast, like a flashlight. It's it's quote unquote fake in that sense. It's actually shining in every direction too, I'm pretty sure. Well, I think so. I actually don't remember, but I'm pretty sure this is like going omnidirectionally, which is a little bit weird given the gun's light should be kind of angled forward. But the orange is actually being emitted by the particles. You can kind of see, it's actually easier I think further out. You can see how like the effect that's coming off of them is like variable just like the sparks themselves are. And that's because it's not faked, it's coming off the particle, which is cool. I wish I had known that sooner, but the muzzle flash does not do that, so. But maybe soon. And yeah, so this is what it is. Just a cone, a burst effect of the same particles, honestly, as the steam, but they're just stretched and made green. That's what I'm learning is how a lot of particles are done. It's like it's actually like take just a circle and color it the right color, and then stretch it and throw enough of them at the screen, and you can't even tell. The actual like circular flash is maybe a little more obvious, but I was not in the mood to like try and either make or dig up a like more accurate looking flash effect. I think this pretty serviceable actually. Good output per work, I'll say. Last one we can quickly glance as well. This is just the bullet trail. Oh yeah, I don't know, you might have noticed that like a lot of these, I don't know, I was doing it earlier. This one doing it? No, I don't know. So where did it go? Where'd the bullet trail go? Excuse me. Oh, it's up this way. So I don't know exactly why there's kind of like a flickering going on. There are two components here, but they should overlap initially, and then one should disappear and the other one should kind of vaporize. And I think that is how it looks in reality, but sometimes these previews look... I wonder actually if I make it infinite. Let's do infinite. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something real. Maybe this is actually a bug if I look closely. It's kind of hard to tell first person. It should look like two tubes of color, one overlapping the other, the green overlapping the green. Or sorry, the green overlapping the yellow. And the yellow one disappears quickly and the green one kind of fades out. That's the effect I'm going for. I don't know, it's actually kind of weird. I can see the green sometimes and sometimes the yellow initially. Well, actually, is that true? I think the yellow is always showing for like a frame. But maybe it is just offset. Maybe that might be something I need to look at because I don't think the yellow should be so transparent. Yeah. Anyway, so that covers like a lot of the hit particle stuff that I've done. Let's talk more about the mechanics of the gun. So I've been intentionally avoiding it. You've probably noticed me like immediately looking away and like not like looking off to this corner. That's because the thing I'm most proud of by far this past month is this auto aim functionality to the gun. I called it the tracker, and this is why. So, actually, let's go to the other side. There's only one target on the side, so it's a little more less noisy. So the tracker will auto lock onto things that are shoot worthy. So, and part of that effect is this little highlight that you can see on the actual thing naturally, as well as the gun like stamping over to then follow it and track it. And so now you can compare the hit sparks too. You can see how much more like flashy they are. I also mentioned there was a distinct sound effect for hitting targets. You can kind of hear it. It's that sort of like wood. It's a wood chop sound effect, but I think it works well for this. You can also hear all the little sound effects that are going in play when things get locked onto or off, which I think is so nice. Like I just added that like yesterday, and I'm like, it's just like adds such a feel to it, like a real like, it just feels real. I can also quickly show off the behavior when there's multiple targets. So there's 3 on this wall. You can hear the lock-on sound for each of them and lock-off as well. You can also hear this little, like an extra chime noise that comes when the lock-on changes. So if it's in the lock-on reticle, I give it a highlight at all, a yellow one at the very least. And if it's the priority lock-on, which just means it's the closest to the center of the screen, it gets an orange lock-on. And so you can see how this like comes into play while shooting. I think having the chime, like the sharpest, tiniest, like pitched sound effect, be the one for swapping works really nicely because you can hear it over the gunfire pretty well. Like you can, even though you can obviously just see like the hit sparks like pluming out of the other target, it's nice to have that sound register a little bit differently. I could maybe like dial up the volume just a little bit actually. It's such a short little ting. Especially as the gun itself gets higher pitched from shooting, from overheating. That might be helpful. But yeah. I don't need to get like too deep into it, but this lock-on system and then the aiming element of it, it's purely like cosmetic, right? Like the gun doesn't actually have to aim at anything. When you're aiming like this, if you look at it in like a first-person view, or not first-person view, but when you like look at what the character is actually aiming at, rifle aiming, aim neutral. This is I made a. I'll go over the whole thing, I guess, but this is what the neutral aiming just looks like. And if you look at it, it doesn't. It's animation with just the arms, but if you look at how the arms are like cocked, you can kind of just tell, right? Like this hand right here is the one that's gonna hold the trigger and. Is like I guess the firing hand, and this one is just holding the front of the gun. You can kind of just tell by looking at it. It is not properly centered at all. Like, actually, I wonder if I can even. Let's see. I think it's Shift F1. No, it's F. Nope. What the hell is it? F5. Well, I don't know. There's a way to go like to spectator view and like look at the character. I wanted to do that, but the camera and the way they're actually holding the gun and the way it looks correct in first person does not align. It's already like game magic, quote unquote, for the bolt to go straight ahead. So I felt no problem with having this. Like I'm also faking this aim basically. The particle is the bullet, the tracer round, the bullet path. What did I call it before? Tracer round, sure. That is coming from the barrel, or thereabout. It's probably not angled properly, but that's kind of why I've got it faded out towards the part that's closest to the gun, because it kind of helps fake it a little bit. But, sorry, what I mean is, if I get closer, it's more obvious, but you can kind of see how the bullet trail's now coming from the tip of the gun, but the angle that comes out of the gun does not make sense, right? That's like unfortunately, you know, a shortcoming of this, and maybe in the future I'll update the way the gun's aiming. But for now, I like any like medium to long distance aiming. I think it actually works pretty well. Like you can't really, if you know, and you can kind of like see it. You can kind of see the seams a little bit, but just just kind of looking at it, it's hard to be sure. To briefly like cover how the lock-on stuff is going on. right now there's this target dummy, and it is a child to this BP lock-onable. Truth be told, most of the logic that's in this target dummy should actually be in its parent, because anything I want to be lock-onable will need this, and so having it in the parent would be wiser. But for now, what it does is the actual objects, excuse me, have their event tick running, checking to see if they should be locked on. We can go into logic. And so lock on scanning enabled. This is a boolean that's stored on each of these objects. I didn't want it to always be doing that because not every gun's gonna have lock on, and like at least in the current use case, it's not. I could just have the gun unequipped or whatever, like stowed away. So whenever that weapon comes out or is put away, this boolean is then altered on all objects using a dispatcher. I think I can just go here to the equips. So this is equipping nothing. This is the one that equips the rifle or the tracker. Excuse me. We set the visibility on. We set the weapon as the component, or we set the variable that's just called the called weapon on the player character. We attach it to their hand. This is actually how it's attached normally on Unreal, just like by default. We're attaching it at the grip point socket. We also set the equipped weapon as rifle. This informs the animation blueprint to use the correct types of animations. Call update. And this is call update auto aim. Yeah, so this is the dispatcher that I was talking about. When we do call update auto aim activity, we're then broadcasting, hey, we want this to be enabled. And so I think if I go back to the target dummy, to the graph, there we go. When we set it up, we bind to the event update auto aim activity. And so that takes in the boolean that's set. We set this, and then the reticle is also something I tried to make programmatic, because maybe I would want another weapon in the future to use it, and it might have a different reticle size. It's been a second since I've touched this stuff, so I don't want to like try and peel that open too much. But it's basically just getting my expectations for what this cyan looking reticle was screen size wise to match like the game world was a little tricky. I don't really have much more to actually add on to that, but I ended up using like a variable to track it. So now, in theory, if I wanted to change this this reticle to be a different size, or I wanted a second gun, like I said, then it should be as simple as changing just the dimensions that are being passed in. But yeah, so that boolean is kicked off by dispatcher, and the target dummies are then constantly on their event tick checking to see if they should be locked on. They're looking for two things. They're looking to see, one, if there's line of sight. And by line of sight, I mean like if there's not anything in between the player character and them. So that's actually what you're seeing when the line is. I'm gonna draw something. Just a cube. Our pillar. So the lines that are being casted from these bullseyes to the player character right now, there's like the 1 green and the 3 red. Those are what that check is. It's a little backwards, but the way debug lines work in Unreal is when it's green, that means it's intercepted. It's gone through something. So the 3 red lines have line of sight of me. They're like they can see me, quote unquote. The green one can, because it's the one that's on the back. So you can kind of see how, like, as I'm breaking line of sight, that also affects the lock on. The other thing too, of course, is the actual being within the reticle. That was the tricky part that I was kind of just alluding to, but where there is a node that is good for checking not checking, if for seeing where on the screen the object is, and then I'm able to use the reticle size to then calculate if it's within the square or not. It sounds so simple, right? But I was trying to like really consider like what if there's variable screen sizes, and so I think there was like a weird element of like actually I should test it, right? Let's see. If I hit play here, scrunch you down. You can see the reticle has resized appropriately, and it also is like functionally smaller as well, which was the tricky part, because like trying to have it programmatically read its own size was not intuitive to me. I think I was misunderstanding what viewport size was versus like another value that I was retrieving and getting them confused. So, um, yeah. To circle back to like the design side of things, actually, like I spoke before in the first video, I'm imagining this game being like a really like frantic, fast-paced style game. This is the type of gun that I'm really looking at, because I can maneuver and dodge and weave or whatever as need be, and I can still like maintain, you know, quote unquote perfect accuracy. Not to say that like aiming shouldn't be a thing at all. This is like probably what I'm gonna consider to be like the quote unquote vanilla gun. It's just damage and it's like pretty consistent or whatever. Other guns might still have some element of precision. You also won't be able to dash like this. I want it to be fast, but I want it to be a little more thoughtful or more mindful. This is like you're just like jerking around here, and I don't think you can realistically have an enemy that contests you without it just being so fast that human reactions are now struggling to keep up at all. But you can see like in a like more controlled state while I'm sliding, like this feels pretty good, looks pretty cool. So that's just the nature of the nature of this gun's design. It's the sort of like always safe evergreen predicament of a weapon. Hit something generally, maybe, I don't know, maybe there'll be a counter to it as they make enemies. Excuse me. Oh yeah, I mean, so I guess I cut it short, target dummy stuff. So it checks those two conditions, line of sight and within reticle, and if those are both true, we'll say, check for lock on. Okay, so I guess I do it itself. We will actually add it to the player character. So we do acquire lock on target, and so this is actually a function that lives over in or an event, I guess. Excuse me, that lives in the player character. We add it to an array of lock on targets, which is that parent class. And then from there, on the event tick, we're also running we're doing like a calculation constantly to see whether or not this or that is the priority. So I think it's on the. It would have to be on the tick. Line rotation, straighten. Let's see, wait. Prioritize. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's right. It's not on the player character, it's on the rifle. Where you at? Event tick. Reduce cooldown, this is the shooting that I mentioned. Managed heat. It's for the most part it's like a cooldown and the heat drop, which I kind of pointed out early on, but there's also the elements of updating the steam. So these are just method functions for updating how the steam scale with the heat. Nothing too crazy or interesting there. Shooting, calculate line trade for hit. Wait, whoops, I'm not in the event tick anymore. Adjust weapon, determine priority lock on, there we go. Okay, so we go through the array, and there is a node. Here it is. There it is. Convert world location to screen location. This was the same one I was using, I believe, for getting the reticle, but now I'm just grabbing it for each of the items in the in the lock-on array, and we're just seeing which one is closest to the dead middle. So after that, we do adjust weapon angle. Okay, so this was tricky and pretty cool, but if I go into the animation blueprint for the first person arms, you can actually see it here. Actually, we'll look at this. I have a blend space for aim left, aim right, aim up, and aim down. If I just do this, you can kind of see this is how the arms adjust. And this is more than the full range of animation that's being used to adjust how the gun is aiming at the target. You might notice if you got like really sharp eyes that these are not perfectly symmetrical. This is minus 80 and 0.5. This is 0 and 90. This is this is 100 and 0.5. 0 negative 90. So it's a little off sync, and that's just something. That's just me like playing with the poses, because I didn't find that like if I was aiming at the far left edge of the reticle, for instance, that it should be angled as much, we'll say, as to the right. That's just kind of a feel check. Like even though I animated these literally by just anchoring the gun to the right hand and the front hand to the front of the gun, and then I just rotated the wrist. Like if you look at it, it doesn't look like how someone would aim. Actually, I mean it looks okay actually, but like this for instance, that's not how. If you wanted to shoot right, you wouldn't just twist your hands and keep your shoulders in the same spot basically. Same here. This looks more like you're just not at the ready. You're at the ready, but you're not aiming actively. But anyway, like in the first person view, because you can't see most of the arm, this was totally satisfactory, and so excuse me. Um, yeah, so it just comes into this kind of crunchy bit of math. I can't even remember how I did this exactly. I have to relearn it here. But we're getting like the way the actor is angled, and then also the look at rotation between the object and the target. We're trying to catch cases where the auto aiming like rolls over, because there was like some weird bugginess early on where if you were looking at it like from behind and like to the left, you'd have like a weird situation where like both numbers would be negative and it would set the calculation. So this was like kind of a headache to get working, but I think I got all the edge cases. Yeah, it corrects from the yaw flips to negative 360 looking back. Yeah, look at that. See, past me is so great. Current me doesn't have to remember how this works. So yeah, and so these just get fed into two floats, which then get taken in by the animation blueprint that I was opening, and you can just see they just get fed into that blend space I was looking at. So that's all the effect is that's going on for that. But it looks so cool, right? I based that off Soldier 76 from Overwatch. He does something similar when he ults. If you ever played that game, it's like just like an auto aim super move that lasts for a few seconds. And I think it does a good job of kind of capturing that sense that like he's like augmented. He's got like a visor, like Cyclops from X-Men, and so it kind of gives. I think it does a decent job of like selling that like futuristic sci-fi weapon stuff, where like the way he's plugged into his gun makes it like just automatic. You even have to like. Or you could say he is aiming, but it's like whatever. Is there? I don't know. I don't know the lore reason, but it sells the idea that there's like technology doing at least part of the work. Was there? Let's see. Rifle component. After the update arm, was there any other step there? Oh yeah, then we do the heat stuff. Yeah, okay. So that kind of covers like the rifle. I think it's in a mostly done state. I've got like a nice sound for when you hit, and I shouldn't say mostly done. There's always more, right? And I still have to like adjust the heat. And the gun model itself, the mesh, is definitely a placeholder. That's just the base rifle. But truth be told, I'm probably gonna just keep using it for all my guns until I ready to bite the bullet and learn how to like do modeling myself. But for now it's in a pretty satisfactory state. So, the next thing that I'll be working on, and it's actually semi already being made, and it's probably grab your attention a couple times, is I want to start working on an enemy. Working on an enemy, excuse me. You can kind of see like there's some like really basic AI kind of going on right now, but this is what I'm calling a drone. It's just a sphere made with a cylinder pointing out. It's kind of its like mouth. It's like every 5 seconds or something. It will stop just tracking you and go for a shot, which is that blue laser. There's no hit reaction, there's no damage, there's no health or anything. But you can see this is kind of like the prototype. It's very early. This is what I'm going to be expanding it here in the near future. I need to make it so it actually is a child of the lock-on stuff, so I can lock on to things. There's like a range limit. I think it's like 5,000 for hitting stuff. And yeah. I would say look forward to seeing like maybe a full segment of combat. Once I have that going, I'm probably going to do another pass on the mobility stuff. Sliding is still infinite. You can just do this forever. Dashing, you know, is also like too unlimited. Either it needs a cooldown or there needs to be more of a not a penalty, but like, I mean, there could be either like a literal cooldown, like I can't use it for 5 seconds, like now, and now I can use it. Or there needs to be something like when you dash, you skid a little bit, and you can't not skid, which means that like dashing continuously is not always a good idea. You might get like caught while skidding and back control or whatever. So there needs to be some sort of like reason to not just dash crazily like this. And then there's the kick, of course, which I've already demonstrated. You can kind of kick off the wall, and it's kind of neat, but it's not the most practical movement ability as I'm imagining the game now. So it either needs to be broken up into like a distinct kick and like wall jump, or something that needs to change there. I don't know. So, thank you so much. It's been a while, and I'm so glad to show this off. I can't tell you how fucking proud I am. Excuse me. Of the lock on. I think this is so cool, and it's really invigorated me with this stuff. I think it looks great. And I hope to see you in the next devlog. Thank you.